A year ago, I made a video saying that the Call of Duty League was bigger than the LCS, and at the time, it was technically true if you cherry pick certain numbers. Specifically, the average concurrent viewership for the Call of Duty League was now higher than the LCS. Same thing with peak. It wasn't much, but that's still enough to really look at and be like, wow, this is massive, right? The LCS was on a downward trend for the longest time. I'm going to show you the year-over-year trend for the Call of Duty League as well. But the question becomes, is that still the case now? 1 year later, let's find out. First, there are a few disclaimers that we obviously need to get out of the way that are worth repeating for those that don't watch either the LCS or the Call of Duty League. Yes, this is not an apples to apples comparison here, because obviously League of Legends has this international space that goes well beyond just the domestic league itself. I know. So the Call of Duty League, it's technically a global league, but nowadays it only ever really tours the United States. All of the European teams have more or less left. While I'm sure there's still substantial European viewership and they could ultimately fill out a stadium, it's basically an NA product for NA people now, because you're not going to get events elsewhere, at least at the time being. For the LCS, Riot Games is going to consistently point towards the international viewership being incredibly strong, which it is. It's growing year over year, but domestically, the LCS has been in trouble for a bit. The second thing to note before we go into this is I am eventually going to talk about what I call LAN time. That is, for the Call of Duty League, events that are purely on LAN rather than online, played in front of massive crowds of people, typically over 1,000 plus, and it's a pretty clear distinction. For the LCS, it's tricky. Technically, it's all LAN. We all play in one studio out in Los Angeles for the overwhelming majority of the year, or in this case, all of this year. So it's not technically not LAN time, but I'm only counting finals weekends as LAN time. The time that you get out of Los Angeles, it's not the same group of people that are going to LCS or LCS regular season week in and week out for the most part. You have some people that travel in, but the majority of your viewership base there, or at least the people that attend in person, they're the same. It's not indicative of your audience nor the growth that, we'll get into it. And the final thing is that all this data is provided by Esports Charts. They are an incredible website that provides data on viewership for every major event. I don't pay for any of the premium stuff, but man, they love to dunk on North America. Whereas I feel like this will be actually a better comparison because we're comparing to completely objective things, or like separate from one another, which they've never done. They've never put an article out about this. The numbers don't lie here. The LCS is once again bigger than the Call of Duty League. 30,000 more average concurrent viewers, peak viewership up by about 40K. And while granted, this is only through 2 majors and 1 split of the LCS, it is important to note that Optic has been playing very well this year, so the Optic effect is fully there. But before LCS fans celebrate, there's something else you need to know. The main reason why viewership is now better for League of Legends versus Call of Duty is because an exclusivity deal was signed for Call of Duty. They now play only on YouTube, including all live views and co-streams, like anything that we have for the LCS with Dom, Cadro, Ellis. Imagine all of them being forced to go to YouTube as well. The fact that Call of Duty is only a little bit behind the LCS and overall year over year very consistent, that's amazing. Now, I'm not sure whether they actually got the bag with this deal or not, and we don't know if like Scump and the co-streamers are getting any kickback from that as well. But the fact that they signed a media rights deal and are still only slightly behind the LCS, that's amazing. I can confidently say the LCS would not be able to survive going down to one individual platform. It just wouldn't happen. Our numbers would be significantly worse. The fall off would be way worse. The other big number that pains me is LAN time for last year versus this year. Unfortunately, it was announced that another major this year, specifically the Carolina Major 4, is no longer going to have fans. It is going to be held out in Burbank because for whatever reason, the orgs keep dropping the ball in these live events. So it's reducing the amount of time that we will eventually have. But so far, year to date, the total amount of hours that Call of Duty was in front of more than 1,000 people at one time, 64. The amount of time that it was for the LCS, 0. Let's take a step back even further. Let's talk about this entire decade, excluding 2020 because obvious reasons with COVID. Let's look at them one at a time before we look at them together. For Call of Duty, this was the beginning of the franchise era, notably only on YouTube. And man, it is wild to look back at those 2021 and 2022 numbers. Average viewership was really low. Peak viewership barely broke 6 figures consistently. Granted, the games weren't great, but you still actually had a bunch of LAN time as well. Like the LANs themselves still filled up with people consistently. That portion's never changed. But 2023, with the retirement of Scump and the introduction of watch parties alongside the media rights being stripped back when they went on Twitch, it just blew up. Like, Call of Duty has not been the same since that point. In fact, actually, let me break this out. This is the difference between the LAN events and the online qualification for each. It's actually obnoxious, the difference that co-streaming made within Call of Duty. And also kind of looks really weird on Activision's front, almost like they went back to Twitch for a year to pump up the numbers for Call of Duty, knowing that they would get this kind of bump. Yes, they got lucky with Scump's retirement being at the time that it was, and then building out throughout the entire year before they sold a media rights deal again. But literally, you just have this like low, jump back up. Oh, we can make money off of this, sell it again. And the amount of LAN hours is just ridiculous. Those that have been around the LCS scene, they know these numbers pretty damn well. Viewership has been declining year over year over year until 2024. This is the first time that we have bucked the trend. Now, are we going to be able to beat full year 2022? I don't know. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch as we go throughout summer, because summer typically does have a fall off. But it's been more exciting. The co-streams are doing well. I'd imagine this number might actually be more consistent than it's been in prior years, but we'll see. Now let's combine the two and paint the picture here. You've got two different graphs going simultaneously. You have an esport that has steadily been growing since 2020 with Call of Duty. They saw an even bigger blip, but for the most part, the trend is still very much upwards. And with the LCS, it's still a trend downwards, even if we have nullified a little bit of that. But the part that blows my mind with all of this is actually the airtime and the LAN time. The biggest complaint you have from both Call of Duty and the LCS is that there's not enough games being played. For Call of Duty, it's specifically that the whole season is condensed down to a short 7 months, and then you just have 5 or 6 in a row where nothing is happening. There's no tournaments, no events. It's just a dead period. And people have been asking, hey, can we throw an additional tournament in there? Anything to help bump up our numbers a little bit. They have so much room to work with, but Activision just refuses to throw them a bone. On the LCS front, especially this year, there was the least amount of games played in the LCS than there ever has been, and that needs to change. And I'm sure the LCS is aware of that, but when you directly look at the hours year over year between these two, yeah, Call of Duty beats them. Now, let's just isolate 2023 as an example, because I was able to pull these. Call of Duty had a total of 412 airtime hours. The LCS, in comparison, had 288, but that's technically a false number. If you take into account our time played at both MSI and World, so assuming just 1 hour for every one single game played by an LCS team at the international stage, we get a slightly higher number, which, by the way, we actually played more at MSI than we did at Worlds. Just a little fun fact there. And we also team killed each other, so we would have even more under the new MSI rules where we can't be on the same side of the bracket. It's going to be great. MSI might be my new favorite tournament format, even if Worlds is still the bigger spectacle. So the CDL is playing more than the LCS, asking for more hours, but the big one, the one that I harp on all the time, which is like the biggest what the fuck are we doing right now moment, is the amount of time spent on LAN year after year. Call of Duty blows League of Legends out of the water. And I truly believe to my core, this is one of the reasons why Call of Duty continues to grow in North America. You are getting the product in the hands of fans more often. Last year specifically, 175 hours to just 20. Now, granted, when international events come, obviously North America is benefiting from that pretty significantly. We might have MSI next year, but even then, it's not a consistent thing. This year, just LCS alone, we're going to have one weekend where we see play outside of Los Angeles. 10 total hours compared to already in 2024. 64 for the Call of Duty League. That is so dumb. And the worst part is Call of Duty fans are upset with how low some of these numbers are. They want more events and more travel because they grew up. I, as a Call of Duty fan before a League of Legends fan, grew up on seeing multiple events in many cities spread throughout the entire year. And then you come to League of Legends and it's like, we'll travel once. That's all you get. It's so dumb. So to put a bow on this entire thing, I would argue the trajectory of the Call of Duty League is still better than the LCS as individual standalone products when you factor out obviously the international implications that come with League of Legends. They are doing the right things despite being in a horrible franchise system for the Call of Duty League, that if they got rid of that, I don't even want to know how big this thing could blow up. It's never going to hit the international scale that League of Legends does, but it could captivate even more of an audience here in North America, which is quite frankly the part that I care about. For the LCS, dude, get on the road more. Take a lesson from Call of Duty. They're being like, Call of Duty is trying to run with Activision carrying a 400-pound weight strapped to their ankle, trying to tie them down. And we just never seem to get the memo for whatever reason. I'll be sure to follow up on this video at the end of the year whenever we have everything from COD Champs and Summer Split for the LCS. We'll do a full year retrospective, but I just found these numbers to be fascinating so far. The media rights deal I thought was going to throw things off a little bit more for the Call of Duty League, but the numbers have remained pretty consistent. A little lower than last year, obviously. You're on one platform and Twitch is like the main source of growth that you would see, but they're in a damn good spot. For the LCS, hey, at least we bucked the trend.